Okay, it's time. This is Jay Brown Yoga Talks podcast. My name is Jay Brown. Welcome to you, and my thanks for lending me your ear. You know, I feel like I've been on a pretty good roll with these intros over the last weeks and even months, where I feel like I've been able to get myself into a positive state of mind before I do them. Even when I'm talking about not so positive things, even like last week when I was talking about a very real situation that I have yet to deal with, and we were talking about hip replacements, and it was very intense talk. Like, even when I've been dealing with difficult things or challenges, I feel like I've been able to meet those with a mindset that feels to me optimistic in some regards. And today I don't feel at all optimistic or positive. And I very rarely mention anything having to do with politics. But in the wee hours of this morning, the Senate of the United States passed a piece of legislation, a tax bill. And I am not going to debate the details of this tax bill. Not that anybody even really knows what they are. Because it's not even about whether or not lowering a corporate tax rate is going to lift the well-being of everyday people or not. And it's not even about just the corruption that's happening in the halls of power. That's always happened in the halls of power, but just seems most blatantly on display. And let's not kid ourselves about it. It is absolutely corruption. I mean, if you look at some of the shit that's in this bill, I mean, if you're a hedge fund manager who lives in the Virgin Islands, you get a 90% tax cut. How about that? Wonder how that got into the tax bill. So it just, that's not new necessarily. You know, there's always been this kind of corruption. But to me, it feels like it's not even just about the greed. It's not even just about people getting theirs. It feels to me like there's a hate in it where you actually want to hurt other people. Like there's unnecessary harm being inflicted. And it felt inescapable today. I was like trying to escape on Facebook, and I just kept landing on those videos of random acts of kindness. I'm sure you've seen those, right? Where somebody sees a homeless person and decides to give them their coat, or their waiter's having a really bad day, so they decide to give him some money. And you know, I kept catching these random acts of kindness videos and just having to watch them, and then just sobbing uncontrollably, just crying. I cried so much today. I couldn't even control it. My little daughters are like, "What's the matter, Daddy?" I'm like, "Nothing." I just needed to see kindness. I needed to believe that humanity is benign, that life is benign inherently. And I do believe that. As I was saying, I generally am like a half full person, but sometimes it just feels like, really? Really? This is how we're going to treat each other? So, sorry to be a bummer, but I couldn't get around it today. Couldn't get around the fact that there's shit happening in my country. Just makes me feel embarrassed, makes me feel humiliated and scared. It makes me feel scared. I just don't understand it. I don't understand how some people just can so devalue another person where you wouldn't see them as the same as you, but you can think of someone else, another human being, as in some way less than you, which then allows for you to be harmful to them and feel right about it. This doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't make any sense to me at all. But, it's funny, whenever I hit these kind of moments where my grasp on the light seems to slip some, I think of this moment I had back in 1998. I've told this story in one way or another on this podcast before. I had this trip to India, and I met this Swami I spent like 10 days with. His big influence on me that 10 days. And towards the latter part of it, I remember I tried to have a conversation with him about what I was feeling when people came and asked me for money, because that happens a lot in India. And he didn't speak great English, so it was difficult to get too in depth, but I was sort of probing him about, from his yogic perspective, how do we think about these injustices, these disparities in people's ability to have even just essential needs, and then I feel guilty if I don't give, and then I have and they don't, and I remember the conversation went on, and he said some things just about sometimes you give and sometimes you don't, and talked about specifically how to think about giving. But the other thing that happened is when I was pointing to just the injustices in the world, at one point he just sort of took this long pause, and he looked at me and he said, well, many people are stupid. After, this is from this Swami who lived up in a cave most of the year. And, I think he's right. I think some people are just stupid. It's just stupid. It's stupid when we can't see the humanity in each other. And it's killing us. It's killing us. It's killing the planet. It's why I'm betting so many of us who are listening to this right now are doing what we're doing. It feels like something that you can do. It feels like an actual act of humanity or kindness to come together with other people, to engage in activities that will help us find purpose and direction in ourselves and in our lives. So, gosh, please, everybody, let's hang in there, or I'll just try at least. I hope you will too. Fortunately, there are good things happening. Like, things for me are going pretty good. Things with this podcast are going really good. And today's talk with Anneke Lucas is perfectly suited to my dismay, in a sense, because Anneke went there in our conversation. We did not have any agenda. We just wanted to get together. I've been in touch with her and wanted to talk to her some as a continuation from our previous conversation, which happened over a year ago. And Anneke is someone who's been speaking about corruption and addiction to power and sexual abuse and pedophilia and conspiracy. And I didn't really know that we were going to talk about that, but we went to all of those places. And I really appreciate the fierceness with which she expresses herself. And you are going to get to hear it today. But before we do, let me drop my stuff. I'm going to be in London at Tri Yoga Camden, January 12th through 14th. I'm going to be in Armonk, New York at Sage and the Flying Buddha, February 3rd. And I'm going to be in Chapel Hill, North Carolina at Triangle Yoga, February 16th through 18th. You can find out about those events and listen to the archives of this podcast and read my blog and find my online yoga video offerings, including my live stream subscription that has 24-hour access. All of that stuff can be found at jbrownyoga.com. If you are listening to this podcast and appreciating it, and you would like to express that through a gesture of support, then you might go to a blog or podcast page and make a direct donation, or go to iTunes and write a review and give us a star rating. That would be very helpful and appreciated. Other than that, I think we should just get to it. I will touch base with you on the other side about a few things, but let's just get into it now. See where we end up in this talk I had with Anneke Lucas.
Hello there.
Hello, Anneke.
Hi, Jay.
How are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm okay too. I appreciate you starting off with such an honest answer. Or
life happens.
It sure does.
So I didn't realize quite how far you are away.
Yes, I've moved.
Really, you really have. It may be easy to get to the city, but it's not quick.
Yeah, not necessarily quick, but I mean, I did do it for a couple of months. It made it happen, but it was a lot of work, and it's just like a lot of unpredictability. Like, you can leave at the same time on the same day every week, and one day you get there totally on time, just fine, and then the next week you're like 3 hours late.
Oh, wow.
It's just really unpredictable, and so like psychologically, it's just hard to handle. and especially if you're someone like me, like I hate being late. It's one of my least favorite things to be ever.
Oh boy.
But it was okay. You know, you do what you got to do. And frankly, I'm really happy in my new place, and like I have a house, and
yeah, I know.
you know, like I have like
a small crappy apartment, you know, in Brooklyn, which what I paid for it is just so ridiculous when you think about it.
I know, and it's crazy. Like once you get over the initial hump, it's like the actual monthly payment on the mortgage is way, way less.
Well, way less than the rent was, right?
Oh yes, like 1/3. So it's crazy, but you know, it's like you got to decide where you want to be and how your life is, and you know, I mean, we couldn't have done it at another time. It was only when the time was right, you know.
Well, I got stuck here really because of my divorce.
Yeah.
It forced me to stay here.
But you know what? Maybe you're not forced to stay there. You could probably do what you do from other places. You don't have to be there necessarily.
Oh, but my daughter's in high school.
Oh, yeah. You got to finish that.
It was not that I couldn't move, like, I could move technically 70 miles out of the city, but I didn't want to deprive her of having a relationship with her father. Mm-hmm. You know, the thing was that I agreed to way too much when we split up.
What do you mean by that?
Well,
like, you don't think he should have had the rights to see her?
No, absolutely, but I gave everything up because I was completely, you know, it was a tough time because I have no family, and then when you're getting divorced, then I was losing the family that I had. And I was all alone. And we had moved back to New York from LA where we met. Mm-hmm. So I moved back here with him, for him. And then I found myself kind of alone here without any support. And my therapist at the same time, the best therapist I ever had, got sick. So I lost everything. at once, and I just couldn't I couldn't fight,
Yeah.
I couldn't fight for myself. I would have wanted, maybe custody or a better settlement, a more long-term support settlement. So, but anyway, I'm not sorry, but it was very difficult. It's very hard to not be able to leave the city at all.
Yeah, and then once your daughter gets settled into her life, you don't want to uproot her. I totally understand that.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, but she's not going to be in high school forever.
No, it's 2 more years, basically, then she'll be in college.
Right.
And then that change. Then everything will change, But until that happens, I have to be somewhere close to downtown where she's in high school.
Right. You're going to hold it down where you are.
Well, I may move again because it's Park Slope. I love my neighborhood. I'm really attached to the neighborhood, but I don't think I'll see. I'll have to see what happens.
Yeah.
Because I don't own, as you know.
Yes, I know. And then things go up and up and up and up and up, and it's unsustainable. Well, anyways, Anneke, it is great to speak with you. We haven't had a chance to talk, and I've been kind of like not easy to reach these days, I know. And also, it's so interesting to me because, we first started talking about having you back on the podcast because, we want to talk about liberation prison yoga, which we're totally going to talk about today. But also, we wanted to talk about a couple other things, maybe like, some philosophical things like liberation, remember? Because from our last conversation, we never went there.
Oh, yeah.
But then, frankly, we had to cancel that one time, and now we rescheduled, and so much has happened since that time.
Absolutely. I mean, we were going to talk about liberation also because it was before our last training, and then I just missed our appointment, I'm sure you'll remember.
Yeah, this is all right. No worries.
Looking at my house from the outside. And,
I know I did. I was a little bit disappointed, only because you came to my place like I wanted to be at your place, but it's totally fine. It was no problem, and I totally understood.
Yeah, it sucks. So, but it's true. First of all, it's a while ago. You've been in Japan since then. And we obviously had our training. And, a lot has changed since then.
Well, what I was thinking
I'm open, we can talk about whatever.
Well, great. We're going to definitely talk about some of the stuff that we intended to talk about, but I feel like we have to talk about other stuff first.
Okay.
And the reason why is, to me, I don't even remember. We talked, it's got to be over a year ago, I think, at this point. And to me, you were doing the Me Too campaign before it became a new thing again on social media.
That is true.
You were, out there calling out patriarchy. And I remember, my talk with you was a big thing for me in my own learning process. Which continues on because, we had this whole talk, and then, you probably remember, I got a lot of not great feedback from people who felt that I was kind you down during our conversation.
Frankly, I did not realize that. I saw one such comment, but I guess I kind of missed it.
Well, that's okay. What happened is people took issue with my interview style. I get excited and I interrupt people. I'm better about it now than I was over a year ago. But people heard that and they felt like I was this, there was this patriarchal, almost microaggressive way that I was talking with you. And I was totally confused because you and I totally became friends, and then I've been involved with Liberation Prison Yoga, and you and I seem to have this great conversation and make this great connection, but people who listened to it were so in an uproar. But since then I have learned, some of where that was coming from, and even some of what they were talking about. People have accused me do I treat women guests on my podcast different than men guests? And I've certainly been examining that. And then with all of the recent stuff where, from Kevin Spacey, Louis C.K., and all these high-profile figures getting called out, and all these women coming out and telling their stories, you've been in my mind. I'm that's Anneke was there before this became the thing it is. And I'm just wondering, what to you has been your impression? It feels to me like there's some kind of watershed moment or something's happening. Do you think that's the case?
Something certainly has changed, you know. I don't know why Harvey Weinstein was the trigger. Perhaps it was that it was several actresses coming forward at once who all have power in their own right, so that people would listen to them. And it was really quite amazing. It's quite amazing for me to see what happened. And I did have the question when Anthony Rapp came forward about Kevin Spacey, which was really the most amazing thing, because now we're past sexual harassment now, and now we're talking about pedophilia. And so I was really amazed that, first of all, the BuzzFeed article was really well written, and it was also clearly well documented. It was well researched. All the people that Anthony Rapp had told this story to before were approached, and they all confirmed that he had spoken to them about it. There was a lot of transparency in the article, and so it was heard. And I wondered if a woman had come forward and accused a famous actor of pedophilia when she was 14 years old, if it would have had the same impact, if she would have been believed. You know, a few years ago, in 2014, Dylan Farrow came forward about her abuse by her father, Woody Allen, and she didn't do so well. And she was backed up by a powerful man, Christopher, I forget his name. Christoph is his last name, but who's already been doing work in that area for many years, and who has a big voice, again, for girls and women. So she had used his op-ed in the New York Times to come out with her, not just the story that everyone knew from the case, but the continued abuse and how Woody Allen's team basically shut her down again and again, even though the courts ruled that he wasn't allowed to see her when she was a child for very good reasons. And the continued support that he received from the acting world, and the reactions from the acting world, or the lack of reactions rather from the acting world to her coming out, and her literally asking people in the acting world to support her, saying, "You saw me when I was growing up. Where are you now? You know, you're still working with my father." And calling people by name who then respond in the most bland possible way, or, you know, basically everybody saying this is none of our business, and, you know, we wish this family well. So she wasn't heard. And now I don't know if it, you know, her brother has Dylan Farrow's brother has been standing up for her, and again he wrote an article that seemed to be going over better. So it's still the issue of when a woman speaks, she's not going to be, she can't expect to get the same kind of respect and the same kind of, well, I think respect is the main word. And I think that's a lot due to women who themselves are not liberated and who work to put men up, you know, who continue the story of just giving men the credit and devaluing other women because of their own self-hatred. That's a huge thing with women. And I've seen that in the yoga world and in the Trump.
Yes. Well, wait. I want to get to what you just said, and maybe even to the Trump world and how that plays into it. But you said something else that I want to go back to first, because you pivoted to the fact that Kevin Spacey got called out not just for sexual harassment, but for pedophilia. And, you know, there's another time in my life when I was like prone to conspiracy theories. Not so much anymore, but, you know, when you came on the podcast and you talked about a pedophile ring in Europe, it sounds crazy, you know? And yet since then, there were things that came out, like, I don't know if you're aware of any of this, but like the lead singer of Soundgarden and the lead singer of Linkin Park, they both had like these kind of mysterious suicides, and they were both involved in exposing a Hollywood pedophile ring.
Absolutely.
There's Corey Haim out there. He's kind of crazy, and people are like discrediting him, but it seems like he kind of has a story to tell, although people are wondering whatever that is. But it seems like with everything that's been going on, I felt like, wow, there seems to me there could very likely be a pedophile ring in Hollywood and like all this efforts to cover it up, and it's not that crazy.
Well, no, it's that we've been brainwashed to accept power and authority, and to operate in this structure where we give the power to certain people to control and basically take our money and then make it an honorable thing, like when you pay your taxes. But what power really does, and what the hierarchy really stands for, is that at the highest levels in any field, there is sexual harassment and pedophilia, and you have people who are covering over their dark side by, being above the law. That's the addiction of power. That and the people who are most drawn to climb the most are those who need that release, and they're very sick people that have zero emotional maturity, that put themselves in these situations at the top when you say satanic ritual abuse, which was part of the network where I was that I was sold into. So these rituals are very sick rituals, and I understand it. I understand that someone who has no emotional maturity can actually develop and become the smartest, most intelligent, most psychic person who is just interested in climbing and just interested in controlling others, just to cover over that childhood vulnerability, which is all perceived as weakness. And at the very top of the chain, that's where you get to break all the laws. And that's exactly what happens there. So it's not just a little bit of corruption. It's much worse than that. And that's what the world is slowly waking up to.
Well, I mean, we should say, I don't think that everybody who's in a position of power is like an abuser and a pedophile. But it does seem like when you would reach that kind of power, it's certainly corruptible, and there's plenty of people who are like that.
When you reach the kind of power, and this is not necessarily so visible, people who are visibly in power, but when you reach the absolute top of the pyramid, the 1%, all those people are complicit, at the least. Because you don't get there without knowing what happens.
So you really do believe there is a conspiracy? See, I'm feeling like we're crazy right now, but I in my own mind, I'm being honest.
No, I don't believe that there's a conspiracy. I survived.
Yeah.
Survived. Yeah. And I felt all the fucking pain and the grief of everything that had been done to me. And it took me 30 years to work through that. So I don't believe anything. I know. And I've survived it. And so what happened to me is called a conspiracy theory in Belgium. So I am it. Yeah.
But what you're talking about, it's much bigger than Harvey Weinstein. Like Harvey Weinstein's just like down the river of it, way down the river of it.
I don't know how way down it is, but it's definitely part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. All right. And then what you were saying before about how women don't get heard the same way. I do think that that's what's really been fueling, like all the women I speak to. I just had like these two women on the podcast recently, and they're like, "Oh, we all have this conversation among us. Women have these conversations among themselves about what happens and not being able to be heard. And so now that like they're not just having it amongst themselves, but it's being put out among these social media feeds." in a new way. Men are having to face that in new ways they haven't had to face it. And I know like a lot of men just we're confused. We're confused. And so it's interesting to hear what you said about you took it all the way again to the big picture of like being in the world of Trump. And I just think about during the campaign where like it's shocking that it came out, that tape of him talking about grabbing women's pussies, and then like nothing happened.
But really, I want to take the focus away from Trump a little bit, because we're talking about levels, and the problem really isn't left versus right, but it really is top versus bottom. So you can't focus on Trump. I mean, if you focus on Trump, you are helping some other extremely deviant power addicts that, that are just happen to be a lot more hypocritical and maybe smarter at hiding it. But it's not, Trump does not belong in the establishment because he's sort of like a cartoon figure. But at the same time, he is not worse. He's not worse. I mean, I'm not talking about his politics. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about power addiction, pure power addiction, and what comes with that.
He just doesn't hide it, and he's kind of stupid about it. It seems. Look up Joe Biden, pedophile. Joe Biden wants to run for president, and this may be. When somebody told me this, I was shocked. I did not want to believe it. I was like, oh, I'm sure that's a mistake, because he speaks for women's and girls' rights very, very passionately. So I was like, no. All you have to do is look at the videos, and he's not hiding it. He is such a harasser. He doesn't distinguish between adult women or children. He's horrible. You can see it. Like, ew, creep. Whoa.
Get his hands off me,
Yeah, well, that's going to be a problem. I haven't seen that video that you're talking about, but if there's a video out there, then...
there's a lot of videos out there.
The new climate that you can't have anything like that, or you're done.
Except that apparently women who have tried to bring his harassment to the media have been shut down and told that there is no story there, and he's apparently a contender for the 2020 presidential race. So it's very likely that story is not going to make the news, and that it keeps being confined to the crazy right wing, whatever InfoWars kind of thing. Which I don't like Alex Jones in any way. I can't listen to him. He's too.
I've tried once or twice, but I can't get through too much of it either. It's.
Right.
I try to listen to viewpoints that I disagree with, but it's hard sometimes.
Right. He's too obnoxious for me to listen to. Like, as a woman, to listen to that guy, oh, no. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I did, when I was watching the videos, and these are videos of photo sessions of the Senate and their family with Joe Biden. So it's a totally public affair. It was it ran on C-SPAN. And he actually brings his hand to first of all, he takes the little girls and puts them in front of him. He massages their shoulder. He puts his face in their ear. He whispers, but he puts them in front of him, and you can see his hand traveling to a little girl's, or what would be her breast, and the little girl stepping away because she's uncomfortable. And it was so shocking to me. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe what I saw. And that's me.
Well, I mean, I have to say, I moved from New York to Pennsylvania, and in the last election, I was always a registered independent from the time I was in college, but I wanted to vote for Bernie. So
me too.
So I registered Democratic Party, and then the really fucked up thing was they did that screwy thing where I actually didn't get to vote because I didn't get my in time, even though it was months in advance. I was like actually one of the people who got screwed out of it. But in any case, I moved to Pennsylvania and I had to register to vote in Pennsylvania, and I'm independent again because I appreciate that you're even willing to go there and call out even the left side as well, because I do think that the Democratic Party has got big problems. There's all kinds of stories that nobody ever acknowledged. And
look, Bernie won the primary. Even though you didn't get the vote, he won the primary. It was stolen from him.
I think so. I think it's well documented, actually, too. Nobody paid much attention to it because there's always focus on other things, but it showed.
And when we speak about women, when we say that Hillary has done so much for women, I'm sorry, but when you reach that level, there is so much that she has not done for women. And
we're going to get in trouble right now, Anneke. Some Hillary lovers are going to come after us.
The Hillary lovers are going to come after me, but I think that you have to look at power addiction and what a person needs to do to get to the top. And that means that is not to get to the top. That is not for your constituents. Once you're voted in, you are not actually serving your constituents anyway. And whatever Hillary has achieved for women's rights, she just as much has gone against it by needing the power more than the integrity. And choosing for power and integrity are oppositional. And that's what people kind of don't understand that yet. Because we want to believe that people in power use it well. But the truth is that the whole system doesn't really work. And we need to think of the world in John Lennon's Imagine way, that we are all human beings, and we all need to empower ourselves and make ourselves accountable. Like, we don't need an authority to tell us what is moral and what is not moral. We don't need to work to be good for the authority. That's a child perspective. It's a fearful child perspective that needs to be good for the mother or father, or else it doesn't work. That's my work with liberation is about exploring inner power dynamics so that you can step out of it and break free from power dynamics and be an empowered person and move through the world as an empowered person.
Mm-hmm. And from there, I agree, it needs to be about reinvention. Because I think the other idea, the sort of Hillary idea, is that you have to obtain the power to then make the change. And then the way that you have to obtain power is through these means that ultimately end up compromising integrity. And then and I think that's true, in a smaller scale way in the yoga world, in terms of like people trying to market what they do as teachers, and then at a certain point, what's good for that sometimes goes against the integrity of what you're doing.
No, but at which point is it all about ego? I mean, I'm in yoga service, and there's so much ego there.
That's interesting. That's right. There's the status of service now.
The status of goodness, but either way, there's so much ego, and again, in the yoga world too. I was doing the Me Too campaign years ago, and nobody cared. I was calling out somebody who was sexually, he was touching a big guru, sexually touching, just groping women, basically.
Well, I'm sorry to cut in, but I know. That's a prescient point, because just in like the last 2 days, there's that Facebook group, the Yoga and Movement Research Group that Diane Bruni had. Well, like in the last couple of days, it got shut down by Facebook. No kidding. Really? Yeah, it got shut down by Facebook. They haven't been able to access it. They think it was because of the video of Patabi Joyce touching people that was up there.
Wow.
And they're not sure whether it was like somebody was reporting them. for like libel or whatever, or they're not really sure. It's all very mysterious. They were given no notice, no notification, no ways or steps by which they could reinstate it or anything. And they're kind of scrambling, but it's been like a fresh thing. So I was just looking at the video again of some of these assists, and you were somebody who was calling that out, like you said, over a year ago.
Oh, no, much longer, much before then. I wrote the first article in 2010 for Yoga City NYC. That was a blog that is not up anymore, but I wrote the first article then, and then I wrote another one in 2015. Yeah. They asked me to rewrite it, basically, because they thought that there would be more, and there was more interest in 2015, but still not very much, and especially not from within the Ashtanga yoga community. So I would call out Ashtanga yogis who are going on and on about Trump and pussy grabbing and wearing the pink hats, and I would say, excuse me, but that's exactly how is that different from what Patabi Joyce was doing? And this is how I did lose quite a bit of I mean, I might comment one or two. I'm careful about, especially.
Yeah.
But really, what's the difference?
I don't know. And I have to say, like, again, I want to be careful too, but I feel, and that's rare for me. Normally I'm not careful, but I just feel like I just was reading some blog posts today making a case for the tradition, and it was sort of talking about how the yoga teachings they come through us, and we're like these vessels, and the vessels can have dents in them, but it doesn't change what was passed through the vessels. And I guess that's the sort of the question that's being asked even in Hollywood right now. Can you separate like the work or the teachings from the person? And you have always said no, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't really know. I noticed, for example, I'm writing about this now for my book, but Woody Allen, I loved his movies because there is something very hypnotic, you have to admit, right? It's like you get into that world. I first moved to the United States. I first moved into the Village. And I moved from Paris, which, obviously a beloved city by Woody Allen, but I moved to his Manhattan, and I was really enthralled by the atmosphere. This is everything I craved, was this intellectual conversations, funny, smart people, this quirky outlook on things. And at the same time, there's in Manhattan, there is, Mariel Hemingway, who was 16 when she played a 17-year-old, and she goes out with the Woody Allen character who's 42. And, I did have this sense, like when he kind of faults her for being young at the end, in their conversation where she's drinking she's having her smoothie or some kind of a smoothie, and I it's so familiar because it's exactly what had happened to me. Not being respected by men, just used as a sexual object, and so so even though I was really drawn to the world, I find that his movies haven't aged very well at all, and now I'm just really offended because I've changed, my consciousness has changed, I've healed, and now it's completely offensive to look at that. And it's pedophilistic, it has that pedophile vibe of like, yeah, this is all fine, people. And I'm sure in that sense, his art did not help. It didn't help. It didn't help illumine anyone. Mm-hmm. But then people that are that messed up, right? And I'm a very artistic person because I've been so. And there's a connection between being horribly abused and then finding escape in art. And so a lot of the greatest artists, I'm not saying all, of course, but a lot of very great artists, and especially with visual art and everything, if you go to the artists, if you go to Picasso, he was no angel, right? So I'm really not 100% on either side of this. Can you separate the artist from the art? The answer is that I don't know, but certain things are certainly influenced by a person's consciousness at the time.
Well, I think that's true. And, I've had a couple other people on the podcast who studied directly with Pattabhi Jois, and they all said pretty much the same thing. When I brought up these questions, they all said, well, he never touched me in an inappropriate way. And most of them talked about all these gifts that they got from him through his teaching. So I don't know. It's like those people didn't have an experience of that, but he did do that to other people. And what does that mean to what?
He also did it right in front of everybody. I think that's something that needs to be acknowledged. I didn't really understand the degree until someone who spoke at the panel that we had about it in 2015 actually mentioned that it was so pervasive. Like everybody knew that it was gonna be their turn. Yeah. So first of all, I don't know if it's true. I'm sure some people, maybe didn't get targeted. I'm not sure, and I'm not sure what made somebody a target and what didn't. But what was very clear and this is what Marissa explained, was that it was pervasive. He was doing it in front of everybody all the time.
If you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of J. Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.